Clive, and so did everyone watching. I'm sure you guys did as well, based from the laughter we were getting out there. It's funny because the broadcast has a slight delay, so we knew there were good jokes coming up.
Anton!
Yeah. Now, Clive, we had a couple of people wanting to know, I guess, acknowledging that yes, we can train incompatible behaviour, but can we use training to change underlying emotional or affective state in dogs? And do we know if we can do that?
Well, so in dogs, I don't think we really know, right? I mean, this has been a discussion that has rumbled along over the couple of days here, and dogs' underlying states are unknowable in other species. We know in human beings that you can, right? So in human beings, you can train people out of a depression. You can train people into other emotional states. So I think it's reasonable to suppose that we're doing that in dogs as well, but they're not exactly telling us. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I guess a clarification on a protocol was with the delivery and location of ringing a bell and throwing some food in,
Yeah.
did it have to go to the front of the kennel, so it was delivery and location that were important?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the food does go in at the front of the kennel, yeah. I mean, if you threw the food in towards the back, then presumably you would condition the exact opposite of what you desire. You'd be conditioning the dog to go to the back.
Thank you for that. Someone else, or actually a few people wanted to know, can both classical and operant conditioning be taking place simultaneously?
Oh, absolutely. So when you think about, I mean, typically when we talk about conditioning, we're thinking as trainers or as scientists about imposing contingencies ourselves. So we know what the contingencies are. We know it's the bell followed by the food, or if it's an operant thing, we know it's the behavior followed by the consequence. And so because we have complete control over it, we know what's going on. But when you grab hold of a naturally occurring contingency, just nature providing consequences or nature providing signals that predict consequences, when you start looking at them closely, it's often surprisingly difficult to make your mind up whether it was operant or Pavlovian, and ultimately it doesn't matter. And if your aim is just to get to a certain behavioral point, then the best idea is to get everything going that you can. I mean, you can certainly create situations where you have operant and Pavlovian pulling together. You can have, I mean, we didn't do it, Sasha didn't do it, but with these dogs in the shelter, you could go in, ring a bell, ask them to do something, and then reinforce it. And now you have both the operant and the Pavlovian working together with you, and that will get you furthest, fastest.
Great.
And just looking back at all the work that you guys have been doing in this area, was there something that really surprised you, some findings that you were like, woohoo?
Well, so this stuff with the Pavlovian stuff, the reason that it's kind of fun to talk about is because I am surprised. As I say, one takes an enormous punt with the Pavlovian. I mean, how do you know that ringing a bell and throwing some food won't get them all just pooping for you? You just don't know. You're like, oh well, I'll just give it a try. You don't know. You don't know. But I mean, I think the reason it worked is because I didn't know, but Sasha, who I don't know how many thousands of hours she must have spent in shelters watching the dogs by now, her intuitions are worth a lot. I'm willing to bet my money on her intuitions when it comes to dog behavior. Indeed, my own dog, she picked it out. She picked her out for me, so a good pick.
Do you think that Pavlovian conditioning has limits, and where would you place them in a practical context?
Well, so of course it has limits. Of course it has tremendous limits. I mean, you're not going to train your dog to, I don't know, think of some complex pattern of behavior that somebody who's good at training a dog has got a dog to do. Oh goodness, what would be a, well,
like an OK Go video sequence.
Yeah. You're not getting a dog. You're not doing agility. You're not doing. I don't suppose you'd be doing the frisbee thing that people do. I don't think I could see anybody using it to train a sniffer dog. It's got to be. It's a more constrained domain. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean to say that we should just forget about it. You know, Skinner said that like 99.9% of interesting behavior was operant, and Pavlovian was therefore something we should just forget about. And my point today has been to say, no, don't forget about it. Just because you can't use it everywhere and it doesn't give you the same kind of control, that doesn't mean to say that it might not be a really useful thing.
And also, going back to the shelters, we talked a lot about shelter dogs yesterday during the panel. You did mention that one of the areas that you're interested in is gene analysis in shelter dogs.
Right.
And I wanted to know a bit more about what your interest is and what your directions are maybe going to be with that area.
Yeah, right. Well, so there are several interesting questions now that we have these standardized genetic analyses available. One question I'm interested in is just, well, genetically speaking, what are the dogs that are filling up the shelters in the United States? If you look at how shelters label them, we believe that some very large proportion are these undesirable dogs that are labeled pit bulls. Well, pit bull's not even a breed of dog, so it's not going to come out in the genetics. But there are 5 or 6 breeds that are thought of as being the package that would be. Well, so are they really? Are there really so many like this? My own dog came back that she's 1/8 Vizsla, 1/8 Chow Chow, and 1/8 Dachshund. So goodness knows it's going to be really interesting just to get the DNA from 1,000 dogs and see what we're looking at. So that's one thing. Another thing is, we know that people don't like adopting dogs that have one of these nasty labels on their cage card. So will it change people's willingness to adopt a dog if it says something different on the cage card? It's still the same dog after all, but probably will, I think, and it'll be an interesting thing to look at. And then the third thing I'm interested in would be to do some simple, quick behavioral tests on these dogs and see if mutts of different genetic heritage, not different breeds of dogs, because there are almost no purebred dogs in the shelters, but mutts of different genetic heritages, do they really differ in behavior? Does it actually matter what breed the dog is when you're interested in its behavior? I strongly suspect, and the great thing about doing science is it usually proves me wrong, so we'll come back next year. I strongly suspect that the genetic identity, the genetic parentage, heritage, doesn't matter. I strongly suspect that it's what the dog does that counts.
And
But
would
we'll
you
see.
be interested in testing them both in the shelter, but also once they're rehomed and looking at that over time?
Sure.
Environmental
Sure.
effect?
Yeah, well, of course, but I don't know. I have to be careful. I'm not sure that that's realistic within the budget I have available to me. But
We'll get you some more money.
excellent, excellent.
And I guess a little less formally, Clive, I guess you must be thrilled with the response we've been getting
Yeah.
with this event this year.
Oh, it's been
Would
fantastic.
you like to speak, I guess, on behalf of the board or in your role on the board?
Yeah, now that
How you
we're
feel?
formal enough.
Yeah.
It seems amazing this is only the second year, right? I mean, it's become such a big thing. Such a big thing.
It's definitely
it's
a
only
thing.
the second time out the box. It's unbelievable to me. I'm blown away by how successful it's been. I think it's I think the momentum is building and building, and all these people that are signing up for the memberships and so on, it's fantastic. I mean, the ambition is to be actually sponsoring research. And I thought, when I first met Prescott and he was telling me about this, I thought, well, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, we're nearly there in just the second year. And the quality and the excitement from the presentations, I mean, I'm like what do Americans say? A kid in a candy store.
shop.
Not a boy in a sweet shop, but a kid in a candy store. It's just fantastic. I had never met Sam Gosling before. I didn't realize that he's also British. I was assuming he was Texan, And so the first thing I said, so you're not from Texas then? I said, no, I'm from Gloucestershire. And James Serple, who of course I know from before, and Ray Coppinger, fantastic, and Simone, who I also, it seems puzzling that I hadn't met him before, but fantastic. And then especially, the little bit that I've been taking responsibility for here of talking to the new researchers. They're good, aren't they? They're really good.
Really exciting to see the future direction.
This is just marvelous. I was I hate to admit it on something that posterity is going to capture, but I'm a tremendous Bob Dylan fan, and I have the DVD of Bob Dylan live in Newport, and it's one of the reasons I was really excited to come here. This is that Newport. 50 years ago, Bob Dylan turned electric.
Got booed.
Got booed. Well, I think Sparks is turning, bringing dog science to the public electric. There doesn't seem to be any booing. I don't know.
Not that we've heard yet.
It's just as exciting. Not quite as musical, but just as exciting. Yeah.
So if people are at home or in the audience and feeling super excited, what are some ways that they can show their support for the Sparks initiative?
So they can go to the website, but they're probably already on the website. That's how they got this, and they can click and get themselves a membership so that they can watch our talks ad nauseum, learn the lines like we used to the old Monty Python sketches, and donate to support canine research, because I think we're all agreed that we have a tremendous pool of young scientists coming through. But, you know, and lots of people approach me and they'd like to do a PhD in my group or Simone's group or James's group, or Ray's retired now. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of interest. There's a lot of need for it. As I say, 10%, more than 10% of all dogs in the United States are in shelters and they're ending up euthanized. I mean, how can we help the human-dog relationship? That's what it comes down to. I mean, it's so central to so many people's lives, and it's so full of pleasure and richness when it works, but it often doesn't work. And what can we do to maximize the positives and ameliorate and minimize the negatives? And without funding, we can't do that. I have to think about, even if I can find funding to train graduate students, is it ethical for me? I mean, what becomes of these people at the end? How many departments of dogology are there? I don't think there are any, actually. I don't think there are any.
There will be by the end of today.
That's it. By the end of today, we'll have the Sparks Department of Dogology.
Well, thank you so much, Clive. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Great fun.
And up next, actually, we have...
Monique, right?
We do. That's right.
We are going to take a break, and we'll be back at 4 with Monique Udell. And please come back then, and we look forward to seeing you all. Okay, have a good time. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah.